Hi, this is Dr. Pratima, Faculty in Physics, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Hyderabad. Glad to see you back in this video lecture. Today, let us discuss fiber optics, the second part of your third module in the subject Waves and Optics. We will just see the introduction of fiber optics, where we will see what is an optical fiber and what is fiber optics exactly. And we will learn basic concepts of this particular topic so that you can understand the complete module of this module 3. I mean the complete second part of this module 3. First, what is an optical fiber? An optical fiber is nothing but it is made up of glass or plastic fiber, and it is used to transmit light from one end to the another end. The thickness or the diameter of the cross section will be as thick as your hair. And as I told, it's mostly made up of glass or plastic. And this is a replacement of copper wires, because copper wires were giving lot of disadvantages, which are like electromagnetic interferences and loss of signals and the environmental defects when subjected to the outer environments. Because these optical fibers or the previous copper wires are used in communication systems. So as you know very well, the communication systems always deals with the external environments. So in order to overcome all these defects, the optical fibers were replaced with glass and also plastic materials. Of course, research is going on to replace even glass and plastic with some other polymers. Now, the picture which you are seeing on the slide is nothing but the cross section of optical fiber which is carrying light. And here you can understand how thin it is. If you take such sort of optical fibers as a bundle, then you can call it as an optical cable, which you are seeing on the slide. So these cables you might have observed when you are sitting in your lab or when you are being installed your internet into your homes. You can see that the installer will take a bundle of a bundle of optical fibers which are having cables connected to the transceiver, or even to the optical fiber will be connected to the transceiver in the form of cable. This fiber optics is nothing but this is a study of the optical fibers where you combine the science and engineering, applying the concepts of science and engineering it towards the design and applying the optical fibers for several uses. So fiber optics is an overlap. I can use the overlap in the sense whenever you are using science and engineering, it comes up with designs and applications. So this fiber optics term was coined by Narendra Singh Kapani in 1956. He is known as the father of fiber optics for his contributions in several studies of the fiber optics. He has just slipped his I'm saying that he missed his Nobel Prize, and he is very much devoted towards bringing several kinds of the fiber optics with several kinds of materials. This is a link where you can see his contributions to the optical fibers in different types in his own interview. If you see the history of the optical fibers, the fiber optical cables have started in the midst of 1800s. This idea where the speed of the light is used to transmit information, or I can say that light is used as a carrier to carry the information in the form of sound or audio, or even sometimes in the form of pictures, that is video. And this was well analyzed by the scientists or the physicists then, like John Tyndall, Alexander Graham Bell, which you know very well, and William Wheeler. So they were trying to research on the technology behind how this light is able to transform information. And this moved on to reach the Corning Glass researchers, one of the famous companies which was dealing with different types of the optical fibers. So amongst those, Robert Maurer, Donald Keck and Peter Schultz, they were standing first in inventing the fiber optic wires, and they named it as optical waveguide fibers, because these optical fibers are guiding the light in the form of waves. Hence they named it as optical waveguide fibers. And they could see that it is carrying about 65,000 times more data when compared with the copper wires which were then existing in this field of carrying information from one end to the another end. Of course, it was a very huge development and they could patent it with this particular number which is given. And in 1977, the first ever telephone communication system using this fiber optic cables was created in Chicago, where the Alexander Graham Bell's invention was the origin. And this fiber optics didn't stop by then, and from then it evolved into many new discoveries. But amongst these, 1990s discovery was I can say that is the standing point for which we are able to see and browse and use the media like anything. So by the end of 1990s, about 80% of the whole globe's long distance data traffic was transmitted using fiber optic cables. The first fully optical fiber cable was buried underneath the Pacific Ocean in 1996, and thus this paved a way for the faster international data transmission. If you look into the timeline where the development of the optical fibers evolved from one observation to the another, around 1840, Daniel Collardon and Jacques Babinet, they were able to get into an idea that light can be directed along jet of water in the fountain displays. So this was an idea which they were applying just to a display. And then John Tyndall gave, around after 14 years, a very good idea that if light can be directed along jet of water, it means that the light signal can be tilted because water flows from one direction to the another direction very easily. And in 1880, Alexander Graham Bell could invent the photophone. I will show you his basic drawings for which this idea has been evolved from. And Roth-Ruiz, after 8 years, he used curved rods to illuminate body cavities, like in the medical field. And because these were the doctors. Henry Saint Rene, he used a system of bent glass rods for guiding the light images. And in 1920, John Logie Baird, he patented an idea where he used transparent stems to transmit the images for television. So this is an idea towards the invention of television. And Heinrich Lamb in 1930, he could transmit an image from one end to the another end by using a batch of optical fibers, which was later named as cable. And Hogler Moyle in 1951, he proposed that if you can cover the core, which is the center part of the optical fiber, which carries the signal from one end to the another end, with a cladding made up of glass or plastic, then this will be very safely reaching, or the signal will be very safely reaching from one end to the another end. And Elias Nizar in 1961, that is after 10 years, he could publish a theoretical description of the single mode fibers. And he demonstrated that this single mode fiber can be used to illuminate laser into it and to filter it out, and this can be used for medical applications. And in 1964, Standard Communication Laboratories in England, they could prove the light loss of the glass fiber can be reduced by removing the impurities which are inherent in the material which you use, that is the silica which you use in the preparation of the optical fiber. In 1970, Corning Glass Works, as I was telling in my previous slide, the very good company known for the work on the optical fibers, they made a single mode fiber with reducing the attenuation. Attenuation is nothing but the loss of signal. So the attenuation was less than 20 decibel per kilometer. Then, after 3 years, Bell Laboratories could invent a new method, which is very standard method, which is even standing as a standard for preparation of the low loss optical fiber. That is, he used modified vapor deposition process. And after 4 years, Long Beach, California stood as the first invention center where the first live telephone traffic through optical fibers was installed. And after 3 years, the telephone companies started to use fiber optics to rebuild their communication infrastructure. Literature says that that was a year where all the towers were filled with lights all through the roads. And in 1986, Emmanuel Desireux, he invented the amplifier. His aim is to reduce the cost, because in order to transmit over several kilometers of distance, they had to use long optical fibers. So in order to use less optical fiber with more amplified signal, he has invented the erbium doped amplifier. And it didn't take several years, but only 10 years, less than 10 years, they were able to install this amplifier into the fiber optic cable itself. So here it is system, whereas here it is the cable itself. And in 1988, in MIDST, they were able to operate the telephone cables through the Atlantic Ocean. So that was the first transatlantic telephone cables. From here, we are able to extend the application of these optical fibers even through the seas, which I am going to show in the next slide. But here, which is a very enthusiastic slide for you, this is the drawing of Abraham Graham Bell, which is, you can see on the drawing, the first drawing is only the system or the electronic equipment which he tried to make for the optical fibers to carry the audio in the form of light. And the second thing is, the person is talking on one side, and on the other side there is a receiver which is able to hear. And on his own writing, he has written that this is the first drawing for his invention as far as he remembers, and his signature is also given at the bottom. So if you are seeing the uses of the optical fibers, you can use these optical fibers to transmit the signals over long distances at very higher bandwidths, that is very higher data rates. The amount of the data which is reaching per second will be very high through optical fibers when compared with the copper wires, which was ruling the communication systems before the invention of the optical fibers. And these fiber optic cables are used to send voice messages or images like photos and even videos at a speed even equal or more than the speed of light. And there are specially designed optical fibers which are used as sensors and the fiber lasers, which have taken place a very good role in telephone service, to the internet cables, and even in the medical devices, which is like endoscope, where you can enter the optical fiber through a hollow cavity of the body organisms. In microscopes, these fiber optic light sources are used to illuminate the samples which you are using to study using this particular microscope. And these uses of the fiber optics have evolved throughout globally, where you can first use it to as a transmission medium. The optical fibers are used as a transmission medium, carrying several gigabytes of data in very short time. And this transmission medium, when given as an input towards a transceiver, is the reason for which you are able to browse several gigabytes of data through your laptops and mobiles. And if you see globally, the underseas or the overseas, which is using the underneath cables, this is the map, and which is very surprising. If you see, each color represents the different optical fiber cables, and if you look very keenly, you can see the dots, circles like things here, here and here, which shows the ports which are starting and to the ending. And this shows how far the invention of a small idea by Tyndall and several other physicists have evolved, even not through just air and into our homes, but even through the water and being operated by several ships. If you want to study more of these particular applications, the link is given below the slide. You can go through this link in order to look several kinds of applications of fiber optics using several other materials, where they were trying to replace silica with several powders, coat them with several polymers to enhance or amplify the signal and increase the data rates. So now let's see the principles of the optical fiber communication. So this optical fiber, as you have seen through, it is cylindrical shape and it is guiding the light wave, and hence you can call it as a cylindrical dielectric waveguide. And this is transmitting the information through light along its axis. And the whole process is depending upon one principle, which is total internal reflection. We will try to understand this total internal reflection in the coming slides. If you look into the optical fiber, it consists of a core, which is the center part through which the light is allowed to transmit. And this core is expected to keep the light signals within it. In order to maintain this core is covered by a material almost of the same refractive index, but maintained at a slightly greater than the refractive index of the core, just to allow or make sure that the signal doesn't escape from the core. So the signal whichever is entering into this particular core has to be passed only through this particular core, but it should not go into the cladding. That's the reason why the refractive index N2 should always be greater than the refractive index N1. You will try to understand how this total internal reflection is really taking place in an optical fiber in the coming slides. So the three properties, if you have to understand the total internal reflection, are the ones which affect it. The first one is the reflection, the second one is the refractive index, and the refraction. First, let us see what is refractive index. This is the rate at which the light travels in vacuum. And this is what you always represent it as C in your studies of physics. And this light, it travels very slow when compared to the outside air medium in a transparent material. That is, when light passes through a transparent material, it slows down. And if you want to see how well it is slowing down or how much it is slowing down, that is known as degree. It can be known only when you look into the refractive index of that particular material. I'm saying this is air and this is glass or water. If you are allowing light to pass or to incident onto this material and take a normal, which is nothing but a line which is drawn perpendicular to the point of incidence, then the velocity with which this light travels in air is slowed down when it enters into glass. It slows down. So how much is this slowing down is happening depends upon the refractive index of this particular glass or water or stone or wood or any other thing, whatever you are taking. So the refractive index of any particular material can be taken as a ratio of the speed of the light in vacuum to the speed of the light in that particular material which you want to know the refractive index. Suppose you are taking water, then the refractive index of water is given by taking the ratio of the speed of the light. As you know, in vacuum, it's a constant. And then you take the speed of the light in water. That's it. You will get the refractive index of the water medium. The same with any other medium. And this refractive index varies for several medium. For vacuum it is 1, and for air it is 1.0, and for alcohol it is 1.32, and for glass you can see it as 1.5, and for water you can see it as 1.33, and you can also see for sodium chloride, sugar solution, and like that. For several gaseous, liquids and solid media, you have different refractive indices. Now, this refractive index and the other two properties, refraction and reflection, goes one into the another or goes collectively in order to guide the total internal reflection. Let's try to understand how. The first thing is, as light wave travels through different media, the speed of the light wave definitely decreases. And this, how well it is decreasing, it depends on the media. Like when you take water, the speed may be differing when you take it for diamond or when you take it for vacuum, right? So it is like if the refractive index is greater, then the wave will be very low in velocity. Greater is the refractive index, lower will be the velocity. And the refraction will take place, or refraction is nothing but bending of light rays. Suppose you are taking an interface between two media. So this is an interface between air and stone. Okay, so air is one media and stone is another media. Let us take that air's refractive index is N1 and stone's refractive index is N2. So, and let us consider that N1 is higher, always it will be higher than the medium, like stone or alcohol or any other alcohol component like polypropanol, or you can take it like ethanol or water. Okay, so N2 is having, let us suppose that it is having a lower refractive index than N1. Then what will happen is the ray which is being passed through air and passing through the interface, what will happen is once it enters from air medium to the stone medium, it bends. So this is the bent ray. So it has bent, right? It has bent. So this bending phenomenon is known as refraction. So if a light ray which is passing from a higher refractive index media to a media which is having lower refractive index, then it is subjected to bending. This phenomenon is known as refraction. You know this very well in your school days, right? So this is just a recalling. And sometimes what will happen is, if suppose N2 is not allowing the light to pass through it, N2, the media, is a media which doesn't allow light to pass through it, then what will happen is this ray which is being illuminated onto this surface which is not allowing light to pass through it, then this ray which is incident will be reflected back. So this is known as reflection. According to the law of reflection, the incident ray, the reflected ray and the normal which is drawn perpendicular to the point of incidence they all lie in one plane. That's what you're seeing here, right? They all lie in one plane. So this is the law of reflection. If you have to determine the degree of the refraction and the degree of reflection, that means how much light is being bent and how much light is being reflected, one thing you might have understood is you should understand the angle at which the ray is incident, and it also depends upon the refractive index of this particular media. We will see how. In refraction, as I have told you, it is nothing but the bending of rays. And the light ray, suppose we are taking that it is passing from a rarer medium to a denser medium. Then what will happen? Rarer medium is nothing but it is light. It is air. Sorry, it's not light. It is air. Rarer medium, here we are taking it as air, and glass, which is a denser medium. And the light is being allowed to pass from the air, which is the rarer medium, onto the glass, which is the denser medium. So what will happen is, it will always try to bend towards the normal. So here you will observe that the angle of the refraction is always smaller. The angle of refraction is always smaller than the angle of incidence. That means that you can understand that the normal is always attracting the refracted ray. So, to summarize, if a light ray is passing from a rarer medium to a denser medium, the light ray will always bend such that it is approaching the normal. Suppose if you take the light ray passing from denser medium like glass into the rarer medium. This is a very important point which you will be using to study how the light ray passes through core and never enter into air. So the light ray, when it passes from water, which is a denser medium, or glass, which is a denser medium, to a rarer medium like air, this will happen a bit opposite to my previous point. In my previous point, what happened is it's bent towards the normal, but whereas here, what will happen is, once the light ray is being incident, it will always try to go away from the normal. The earlier one was like it was going to move towards, but now it is away. So now when it is being away always, the angle of the refraction will be greater than the angle of incidence. We will try to look into these 2 points again in the coming slides. So the total internal reflection, if you have to understand, you should look into how the refraction happens when the angles of incidence or the incident angles are being deferred. So when the angle of incidence increases, what will happen is the angle of refraction also increases, right? So for suppose, when this is the incident light, which is making an angle of incidence I with the normal, it's being refracted through this particular angle. So suppose if I increase it like this, so there is an increase in I. So what do you expect is, there will always be an increase in R. So this will be R. And if suppose there is one particular angle where you have gone on increasing the angle of incidence when the light ray is traveling from the denser medium into the rarer medium, you have approached one point of incidence, one point where the angle of incidence is something where the angle of refraction is 90 degrees. That means the light ray has bent such that it grazes along the interface. Then normally, how do you see the angle of refraction? The angle of the refracted ray with the normal will be 90 degrees. So this angle of incidence at which the angle of refraction is 90 degrees is known as the critical angle. So this angle of incidence is known as critical angle, IC. And suppose if you are taking something which is greater than the critical angle, if you take something which is greater than the critical angle, already earlier the light ray, when the angle of incidence was lower, was like this, and when you have increased the angle of incidence, the angle of refraction went on increasing, and then it became to graze the interface, which became 90 degrees, and that angle is that angle of incidence at which this is 90, the angle of refraction is 90 degrees, is known as the critical angle. And now still beyond this critical angle, if you still increase the angle of incidence, what will happen is the ray will not refract, but it will kick back or bounce back into the same medium, which is the denser medium. And that means that it doesn't enter again into this particular rarer medium, but remains in the denser medium itself, and this is known as reflection. So now I can say one thing, that beyond an angle of incidence, which is the critical angle, the light ray will never refract, but it will enter into a new phenomenon which is known as reflection. And this you can call it as an internal reflection, which is totally being observed, and hence you call it as total internal reflection. Why you are using here total? Because not even a part of the ray is bent or lost into the rarer medium. So this can be judged more by using the Snell's law. What does Snell's law tell to you? Snell's law, this is used to determine the amount of the refraction. When you take the light which is transmitting between two media of refractive index N1 and the another of refractive index N2. So if you are taking two media like this, then the angle of incidence, if it is theta 1, and the angle of refraction, if it is theta 2, then definitely, as I told you in my first slide of when we started looking into this particular phenomenon of the refraction, the speed or the velocity will also differ. So V1, when it is of one media, that is when it is being incident, will differ from V2. And if you take this refractive indices and this angle of incidence and the angle of refraction and V1 and V2, where theta 1, N1 and V1 refer to one media and theta 2, N2 and V2 refers to another media, then Snell's law relates the three, that is the refractive indices, then the angles and the velocities, with this particular formula, where he takes the ratios of the angles of the incidence and the angles of the refraction with their sign values will be directly proportional to the velocities, and it is inversely proportional to their refractive indices. So the light traveling along the normal, if you see along the normal, if you just incident or like this in this picture, if you think, then it doesn't change the direction, but it just goes like this. It just goes like this. It doesn't change any direction. And suppose it hits this particular interface. This is the interface. If it hits the interface, making some angle, then there will be a change in the light speed. There will be a change in the light speed, and it propagates through the second media with a different angle, which is theta 2. So this is what Snell's law says. So once the light ray is incident along the normal, there will not be any change in the velocity or in the direction, but there will be a change in the velocity, a slight change, but in the direction there will not be any change. But if you make an angle of incidence, or if you incident the light ray making an angle theta 1, then there will be a bending of the light ray making an angle theta 2, which is different because the speed of the light ray varies once it crosses the interface, because it is entering different media. That is, N1 is different from N2. So this is how you can understand Snell's law. If you look more into the Snell's law and try to understand what happens when light passes from glass, which is of higher refractive index, into the air, which is having lower refractive index. So glass refractive index is 1.5. So according to the Snell's law, what do you know? N1 sine theta 1 is equal to N2 sine theta 2. So N1 here is glass and N2 here is air. So glass is having glass refractive index is equal to 1.5, whereas air refractive index is 1. So substitute this here. So N1, which is glass refractive index, is 1.5. Sine theta 1 is equal to N2, that is 1, into sine theta 2. So if you can see here, sine theta 2 is equal to 1.5 times sine theta 1. So this shows very clearly that theta 2 is greater than theta 1. So if theta 2, this is theta 1 and theta 2. So theta 2 is being greater than theta 1. It means that it can be understood that in spite of bending closer to the normal, if it is increasing, that means it is moving away from the normal. So this point, which I have already told in the previous slide, has now come true when we apply this to the Snell's law. Now what will happen if you keep on increasing this particular theta 1? Will this theta 2 goes on like this and like this and like this, or if something else will happen? So as theta 1 increases, theta 2 also increases, right? So this is normal and this is the light ray which is incident along the normal, and if you are increasing like this, if this is the normal, then if this is theta 1, then what will happen is this will be, this is the bent ray, so this will be theta 2, right? So as you are increasing the normal angle of incidence, as you are increasing the angle of incidence at one particular point, this as you're increasing, I'll try to show you like this. So this is one angle of incidence, then the ray may be refracted like this. This is I1, R1. So let's try to increase the angle of incidence. Let's try to increase the angle of incidence like this. Then what will happen is the angle of refraction also increases. And still, if you slightly increase, then it slightly increases, right? And there comes one angle where this doesn't enter this media N1, but it crosses along the interface, and this angle is known as the critical angle. So now this is what is that point. When theta 1 increases to an angle theta c, when theta 1, that is I, has increased from this to this to this to this, after then this, then there we have seen one particular angle where the R has increased from here to here to here and now to here, which is 90 degrees, and this particular angle is known as the critical angle. That means that light which is being incident through N2 cannot enter into N1 but remains in N2 itself. So it's being reflected totally. So you call it as total internal reflection. So this is how this picture depicts how an optical fiber is, which is having the core, which is the green color part, and the cladding, which is the orange color part, if you can see clearly. And when light is being incident through the core, how is it happening when it is incident along the normal, and what is happening when it is making an angle with the normal, and when this incident angle is being increased to one particular extent, how the light ray grazes along the core cladding interface, and beyond the angle of incidence, which is the critical angle, we can see that the light ray has internally reflected. So if you have to understand more clearly, I have given here this picture. I have taken this picture where theta degrees is the angle with which the light ray goes incident along the normal, that is 0 degrees and 0 degrees, and when the angle of incidence is 20 degrees, you can see that the angle of refraction is 27, and as you increase from 20 to 30 to 40, the angle of refraction has been moving away from the normal, making an angle of refractions which are also increasing from 27 to 42 to 59, and at one particular angle which is beyond 40, that is 48.8, you can see that the angle of refraction is 90 degrees, and beyond this critical angle, when it is making an angle of 60 degrees, we can see that there is a total internal reflection into the water which is 60 degrees again. So this phenomenon, the total internal reflection, it's nothing but a phenomenon which happens when a propagating wave strikes a medium boundary at an angle larger than the critical angle, larger than this particular critical angle with respect to this particular normal. So this is an angle which is normal with this particular normal. And this is a simulation where you can see the total internal reflection which is happening beyond the critical angle. So this is one particular media which is denser. This is denser media, and this is a rarer media. So this denser media, once it is making an angle below which is the critical angle which is being blinked in red in color, that's the red in color, you can see that the refraction has taken place, and beyond this critical angle, you can see that the total internal reflection happens. And in one more simulation, you can see the total internal reflection between the core and cladding interface. So that's how the light ray which is incident into the core doesn't enter into the cladding and just internally reflects along the boundaries of the walls of the core. In other ways, I can say that the walls of the core bounces the incident ray back and again forth, in like up. When it is hitting the upper wall, it bounces back as it is kicked by the wall of the core, and it hits the bottom wall of the curvature, and again it is kicked back or bounced back so that it knocks towards the upper wall of the core. That's how the total internal reflection takes place. Now, if you look into the optical fiber construction more clearly, this is the core through which the light ray enters. This is the core, and this should have a refractive index which is different from the cladding, and this core and the cladding only is known as an optical fiber, but this needs some covering or a coating which can give some protection, mostly made up of plastic. So that coating is known as a buffer coating, which is mostly made up of plastic, whereas core and cladding, or from the beginning they were used with silica. They are made with silica, that is fused silica, whereas the buffer coating is made with plastic. So these three are the major components of the optical fiber. But when you take this optical fiber as a cable, when you take this optical fiber as a cable, the core and the cladding with the buffer coating are given an additional strengthening member or a strengthening layer, which just helps in protecting the core when it is subjected to tension while installation. In addition to this strengthening coating, there is an outer jacket. This outer jacket helps in protecting the whole core cladding and this particular strengthening member against this environmental hazards, like you can see these cables being installed beneath water and even in the air, in fog and all. So there are some incidents which you see on the slide where the cable gets spoiled when water gets installed or gets settled in the inner diameters of the core. And research is being still done, and there are several papers which shows different kinds of lubricants which are being installed, which can prevent the water in being entering into the optical fiber in order to overcome this particular environmental hazards. And if you see the animals, squirrels mostly, or when you install these optical fibers in through trees and all, squirrels are mostly subjected to always bite these particular optical fiber cables. And here you can see a beautiful monkey, baby monkey, trying to bite this particular optical fiber cable. So this particular outer jacket gives more protection to prevent this particular environmental hazards. And if you see undersea fiber optical cable, which is a very innovative application of the optical fiber, and you look into the anatomy, you can see that this particular optical fiber, as I have told you, is surrounded by a water resistant jelly coating of around 2.3 millimeter. And in order to overcome or to protect them from breaking, to protect these optical fibers from breaking, these optical fibers are surrounded by steel wires. So the steel wires are wrapped around one layer upon the another layer just to give protection from breaking. So, and this is in turn given a coating or a tubing with copper just to protect it from water. Though it is, we have seen that optical fibers are a replacement of copper, still copper gives a very good protection in terms of the environmental protection. So the engineers always prefer copper to use as a sealing to protect the optical fiber from cable. And in turn, there is also some insulation which is of high density polyethylene to give a total protection of this whole anatomy of this optical cable, till which we have seen till now. So this one is one particular example. TAT8 is one particular example designed for the deep ocean optical fibers, where the optical fiber are subjected to a lot of pressures. And this is the anatomy which is designed to so that the optical fiber can survive the pressures of that particular deep ocean. So to summarize, we have seen that optical fiber has a core whose refractive index is a bit higher than the refractive index of the cladding, so that N1 sin theta 1 is equal to N2 sin theta 2, which is the Snell's law, which also rules the velocity or which also gives an explanation of the speed, is being satisfied. That is, n1 sine theta 1 is equal to n2 sine theta 2. So n1 by n2 is equal to sine theta 2 by sine theta 1 is equal to v1 by v2. So if the core has a refractive index which is greater than the cladding, what will happen is, if n1 is greater, then the refractive index, if you see the core, this is like this and the cladding is like this, and this is the normal, and this is theta 1, right? So what will happen is, this refractive indices will judge the or have a control over the speed. So thus we can control the speed of the light, tailoring the refractive index of the core and the cladding, and we can maintain that the refractive indices will prevent the loss of the light ray from the core into the cladding. So we have also seen that the angle of incidence, when it becomes greater, the angle of refraction approaches the interface, and at one particular angle, which is critical angle, it doesn't enter into the cladding but just reflects back into the core. So this is known as the total internal reflection, and all this we have seen through the reflections, refractions, and the Snell's law, which is mostly controlled by using the refractive index of that particular media through which the light is being transmitted and subjected to either reflections or refractions. Hope you have followed all the basic concepts which we have seen. I close my lecture with John Tyndall's statement: "The human mind is not satisfied with observing and studying any natural occurrence alone, but it has to take pleasure in connecting every fact with which this particular occurrence which you are observing has to be connected with what has gone before that particular occurrence and with what is to come after the occurrence, and that is known as research." I love this quote and hope I meet you in my next video lecture, where we will be seeing two basic parameters which are known as acceptance angle and the numerical aperture, which judges how much amount of light can a core really take so that it can safely reach the other end by following the principle of the optical fiber, which is the total internal reflection. Hope I meet you in my next video lecture. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.